This podcast is rated E for explicit.
What are you afraid of? Why do you stay hidden in the shadows from your many shades of gray? What do you ask God for when you kneel down to pray? When you get tired of hiding, but lack the courage for the deciding?
What do you want from me? It's not good, whatever it is. My mother told me. You know what I mean? Then you find someone that can be a friend to you.
I'm afraid to be more intimate because I'm afraid of what that's going to feel like.
If a straight man and a straight female are like, that's my best friend, they're like, nah, y'all are doing something, right? Like, you guys have something.
I feel like at times parents may handicap us, putting like their experiences and their influences on their child.
What you described to me is just really, truly loving another person, right? And we're not allowed to do that with other boys.
Join us for this series that explores the many shades we hide in, the many desires we fight, the many things we love that we never love in the light. The very thing you've been afraid to say.
I think I told my mom once by text I love you, and she was like, thank you.
You may.
And I thought, like, that's not happening ever again.
Very well hear it here.
Conversations like these are so important for us to have.
In our new series.
Society likes to correlate emotions as a feminine trait. And when it's a feminine trait, you're like, I'm a guy. I'm a man. I don't have that, right?
I don't care. No, I'm going to cry right now. And I don't care if I get yelled at or whatever. Crying is about to happen.
The shades of Bay. You met me in the midst of many things. Shedding skin, sprout wings. Looking at life as a spiritual being through a human lens. Having conversations with God about so many things. This show is your invitation. The poet God is the conversation. Were we crippled from the start, fed with poison from the parts of our community that only embraces a narrow view of humanity, though it be far from their own reality? Were we nurtured on the nipple of insanity? Join us as we take a tantalizing journey deep into the dark, forbidden world of how our upbringing has shaped our sexual views, gender roles, and relationship patterns. In this and the upcoming episodes of this series, we will explore the dangerous dance between nature and nurture and unveil the provocative teachings and messages about love and intimacy that we were exposed to and influenced by. Through intoxicating storytelling and passionate discussions, we'll navigate the twisted and captivating path of healing from past traumas as we seek to answer why so many people hide parts of themselves from the people they love the most, while sharing those hidden parts with those who are like ghosts, and how we have emerged out of a culture of hiding, a culture of fear, a culture that provided a corrupt kind of care. And now we're here, beyond the ripples of the toxic nipples.
One of the most significant experiences that I can recall having was in high school. I was living in Killeen, Texas. It was my first job. I was working for this company called West Telecommunications, and it was as a telemarketer. And I remember one evening going, and we always had like different seating, and so you never know who you might be sitting by. And I ended up sitting next to this guy, and he and I just kind of like hit it off right off the bat. And I remember the conversation that I had with him. He was sharing with me about his relationship with his mom and his stepdad, and he was sharing with me that he felt abandoned by his mother because of what she felt she needed to do to keep this person happy. And he was really, really angry about it. I don't remember what I said to him in that conversation, but whatever it is that I said to him, he felt like a weight was lifted up from his shoulders. And he said to me, he was like, I have to introduce you to my best friend. The best friend also happened to be working for the same company. So during the break, he said, you know what? How about this? I'm going to switch seats with him so that you guys can finish the rest of the shift together. And so his name was Oscar. And so he was like, I'm going to tell Oscar, he's going to say. So after the midway to the shift, Oscar and I briefly spoke in the break room, and then he sat where I was sitting. And I've never experienced anything in my life where it felt like lightning struck. It was like electric. Like, I was like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand I have no words for it. I don't have anything for it. It didn't make any sense. It didn't, but we started a conversation at work that lasted like till 4:00 in the morning after we left there. We talked about everything. It was like we were catching up on each other's lives from birth up until the point where we're at now, because it was like, I have to know everything about you because I don't understand what's going on, right? And so I remember him, he talked to me a lot about his relationship with his girlfriend, who, the things that he was going through with her and stuff like that. Just about everything, every part of his life. He was so very different from me. He was this kind of, I think he was like Italian, guy who was, he was in a gang, which also added an extra layer to this whole thing. So who he identified as was so contrary to this experience that he was having with me. I don't think he had any black friends, first of all. It wasn't even an experience that I reflect on as a gay experience. We never had any sexual contact or anything like that. But there was an intensity to that connection that was beyond anything sexual, period. Like, it wasn't even if we had a sexual encounter, I felt like that would have been a lower vibration from where we were at. You know what I'm saying? And it opened me up to the possibility of how powerful a connection can be with a human being. And I had that happen to me at 17. So I remember going to school and talking to one of my teachers about it. And she said to me, you better cherish this moment, because some people go their whole entire lives without experiencing anything like this. They get married to people, and build lives with people that they never feel anything like this with. And so I didn't know what that was, but I do know that it changed me. It changed me. It changed my outlook on what I thought was possible. It changed me in ways that I'm still trying to understand.
There's some like training as you are raised where they tell you who those people are that you can have those relationships with. And then you meet someone outside of that, and then you realize, oh, I can have this relationship with this person, you know, outside of what my parents. I'll give an example. Like my mother had me when she was 20, very young, had to drop out of school, you know, and be a housewife. So she's always raised me to be like, school, 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 forget about boys. Boys only want one thing. They don't understand you. They're not going to connect with you. And if they're connecting with you, it's because they want to have sex with you. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm looking at boys not as someone that I can be friends with, because there's always that extra layer of, what do you want from me? You know, it's not good, whatever it is. You know, my mother told me, you know what I mean? So, but then you find someone that can be a friend to you, that you understand, you know, and you're like,
Although they're
of the opposite sex. So it's contrary to what my mother is telling me, that I can have like certain relationships with people, what they're going to be like. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there's just, I've used that as an example to talk about how people in your life will tell you what certain relationships are going to be like, what you should, the kind of relationships you should be having with them.
Yeah.
You know, of a person of this stature, of a person of this gender, of you know what I mean? There's like rules. This is how you act when, you know, you cross your legs, you do this, you know, this is how you act when certain people are there. So it limits your intimacy with them when you're remembering all the rules of how you're supposed to conduct yourself with them.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I wanted to kind of chime in because I see like two interesting dynamics that both of you all shared regarding how your parents' upbringing influenced or kind of shaped your expectations on, you know, like relationships in that sense. And it's interesting because like I'm not a parent yet, but I'm very like observant on how, you know, I was raised, how people raised their, you know, how my friends turn out, understanding like their background and whatnot. And I feel like at times parents may handicap us in, you know, putting like their experiences and their influences on their child because, you know, like you said, you might have had that fear of like, you know, you might have missed out on great friendships that you might have long term. You know, not saying that you don't have it, but, you know, you might have been reluctant at that time, your upbringing, to be friends with a boy, you know, because, you know, but at that point, it's also like experiences. Just because that was her experience doesn't necessarily mean it might be yours, you know.
True, but as a child, you're listening to someone
exactly
who's supposed to be
that knows
right
it
all the time.
that knows
yeah.
it all. When you grow up to be a teenager, you're like, my parents don't know.
Yeah.
But at the time when you're like formative, you're thinking what they're trying to teach you is what I should be.
And that's why I said
living.
sometimes I feel like, you know, we might be handicapped, you know, in that sense, because your parents should always push you to, you know, explore new things and, you know, find what fits you and find what is yourself. You know, when that opposite is like, no, you have to do this. This is the only right. Like, you know, I had this conversation with my cousin recently. Like his dad was kind of telling him like, if you guys don't go to school, you can't really be successful. So I don't know, you know, and then he's like, you know, late 20s, early 30s, kind of getting into that. And he's having success in different areas, but it's like that older and he's Caribbean. I'm Caribbean also, by the way. My parents are from Haiti and I'm first generation born in America. But that like, you know, mindset, like Caribbeans are heavy on like, you can't be successful without an education. And, you know, in 2023, that's not the case. So it's like you can't handicap your child because school's not for everybody. They might not be book smart. They might not know how to learn, but they might be, you know, successful business people, or they might have soft skills, you know, like maintenance on cars or HVAC, whatever the case is. But
and they're handicapping you against listening to people outside that don't have an education. They're like, don't listen to them. And they're therefore limiting your willingness to have any kind of closeness with those people because they're like, my parents already warned me that you don't have your life together. You're not a good influence for me. So let's just close off the relationship right there, you know?
Yeah. One of the other significant connections, I'll call it a connection, that I had was from this lady. I think she was in her 80s. And I met her over the phone. Her name was Mary Myers. I remember her name because it was an impactful relationship. And I called her to sell her a plan. And she sold me on life. You know, she talked to me about her relationship with her husband, her relationship with her kids. She was so candid. She was so honest. And I was so captivated by everything that she had to share. And I don't know why that happened the way that happened, but I felt like God was using her to speak to me. And so I was a captive audience, and we exchanged numbers, although you're not supposed to do that, you know. And we would talk.
Don't they record those calls?
They do.
Listening to this?
Our relationship became so much of a thing that my aunt, who I was living with, she called my mother and she's like, you know, I'm really concerned about Akil. You know, he's spending a lot of time on the phone with this older woman. I don't understand what an 80-year-old would have to talk to a 17-year-old about this. I'm not comfortable with it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you basic bitch. Like, I mean, first of all, you don't even know what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? But it was another example of, people not being able to understand other experiences that people can have. You project your limitations, your mindset onto other people, and you just have no idea the experiences that can be had between people when they put those other things behind. When you put your sex behind and your gender and all these other things, you could connect with somebody in a real way that society says you're not supposed to have that experience with that person, and you're not supposed to have that experience at that age, you know, with that race. She was a white woman. You know what I'm saying? So I got an education about certain things in respect to those two people who couldn't be more different from me, you know, who couldn't be more different from me.
There is a path that society expects for us to go on, right? But that society is people, right?
Right.
There are individual people out there who have bought into that, and then they sell that to their children. Like the point you were making before, you know, parents should be able to help their children shape their lives. But what happens a lot is parents are dictating what those lives should be. And that's what causes a lot of that blockage that we get, where we actually have to learn how to separate what it is that we really want to feel versus what our parents are telling us we should, right? Mm-hmm. Because I was thinking about your revelation, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, you were kept in such a box that you didn't even know this emotion was possible, right? And I wonder, like, how do people break out of that without having like an epiphany situation like you do? How do you move towards a situation where you understand that you're in a box and you want to find your way out of it?
I feel like it will happen organically. Like your parents can only do so much to protect you, and you're going to have to go out into the world. And when you go out into the world, you're going to interact with people. And in that way, your parents have no control over how you're going to respond to those people. You know, they want you to respond a certain way, but you may not. You may feel a closeness, a kinship, a friendship, or you can relate to that person, and you're going to be confused because you don't understand how the feelings happened. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that nobody can control that. You're going to go out into the world, you're going to meet people, you're going to experience things, and you're going to change how, you know, you feel about connecting. Because when you find an experience where, oh, I connected with someone I did not expect to, you know, then you're going to search it out more. Mm-hmm. You're going to be like, but I think I had a great experience with you. Let me hang out with you more. Let me explore your family, explore your friends, explore your community, and see if I want to be a part of that, you know?
But I think you have to be open for that.
True, but sometimes you may not be open, but still the experience just blows your mind open. You know, you're like, oh, I can't stop myself from being curious about this person or their life experience.
I have a concern, and it's something that I've always feared. And it's because I feel like as little boys, we're put in that box. We're given those rules about what we can feel. And I feel like what you described to me is just really, truly loving another person, right? And we're not allowed to do that with other boys, right? And I say that we're not, but I feel like there's a lot of pressure when you have really heightened emotions to put some label on it. And a lot of times they want that label to be sexual, where it really could be just simply, I love you.
This whole notion that every time somebody talks about an LGBTQ relationship of any kind, the tendency is to go straight to sex, right? Like, that's the only thing that comes up for you. And my life has been so different, right?
Can I tell you something? I'm sorry. I have a funny moment because that conversation about going straight to sex, my mom is super open and stuff. But we had a conversation recently where I have to go down all the people who have visited her house and be like, no, not him, no. So it's like in her head, she already had some relationship, and I've had to go and debunk them, right? And it's like, no, that's just a best friend. Let it go. Right. Let it go. So, and I'm sorry, it just made me laugh when I was thinking about the way you described it.
But I don't even think that it's just that though, right? Because I think that even if you look on in like what you were saying, even on a heterosexual scale, if a straight man and a straight female are like, that's my best friend, they're like, nah, y'all are doing something, right? Like, you guys have something. And I think that that's really where the struggle is, because I wholeheartedly believe you can have a soulmate that's your friend, right? You can have multiple soulmates. It's the connection that you have. Like, a soulmate is literally this connection that you have soul to soul. It's nothing about physical, right? It's past that. And you can have that in a friend. And it is a person that you feel extremely safe with. That's also the reason why, like, you would hope your partner is your soulmate, because you want to be safe there. So these are the connections that you can have, and it doesn't matter if you're straight, gay, and whatever the case is. If I'm attracted to women and I'm like, no, this is my best friend, and it's like, y'all have something going on, right? Like, you guys are too touchy or whatever. It's like,
I think it's just an American obsession with sex, just in general, where everything has to be about, like, is there sexual attraction? You know, you see two children together and you want to be like, oh, she's going to be a heartbreaker and he's going to be a heartbreaker. And it's like, can they just be friends without you turning it into a boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend situation?
Yes.
You know,
but that programming.
Yes, you're realizing that you're trying to program by saying these things, or you're, you know, trying to facilitate some kind of education to them as to what their relationship should be, you know?
Which reminds me of another short story I wanted to share with you guys. And I'll share that story right after these messages.
What is it that these people are looking for? I mean, because it sounds to me they're just looking for a big dick.
Listen, so much has been attached to the black penis. Our values, our ideas around what it means to be more or less of a man, our fantasies, and as history shows, our fears.
When white people have a belief system that the role of a black person is to bring them pleasure, is to make them happy, is to fulfill whatever need or desire it is that they have. And that message gets passed down generation to generation.
Yes.
And it shows up in different contexts, but it's the same shit.
They castrated us. And the reason why they castrated us was because they were in fear of the big black penis.
We unpacked a lot in this episode. Press play, sit back, because it's a heavy load. Listen to Past the Black Penis, Season 3, Episode 2.
And after you follow the Poet God podcast on your favorite podcasting app, a quick search of the Poet God on Twitter and Instagram will connect you to just what we have on tap. And if you're not that social, at thepoetgod.com, we got your back.
had met this young lady. She was the receptionist at this company I used to have to deliver packages for every day. And her and I would have these, fascinating conversations while I would be waiting for them to bring the packages from the mailroom. And one of the things that she had talked to me about, she said to me that she used to love to talk to me about her relationships and her Tinder experiences, right? And so she said to me, she was like, I'm just tired and exhausted with men not being emotionally available. She had a aha moment when she was hanging out with her mom and her grandma and their nephew. And she said the nephew did something. He liked to play with dolls or whatever. And the grandma scolded him and said something along the lines of, y'all better get that doll away from that boy because we don't want him to be no sissy, and it was the same kind of similar messaging from her mom. And she said, she was thinking, first of all, this child don't know nothing about none of that. Right. And she was like, she said, but she sat there and she was thinking about it. And she says, that is why I'm having issues now in my adult life, connecting with these men because they've been traumatized. She was saying we as females in our mother, grandmother roles, we've traumatized them from being able to just be who they are, right? And trying to project our homophobia on them that even if they do become straight, whatever it is the child ends up being, right? They still have this trauma that prevents them from being who their full emotional selves within their heterosexual relationships.
100%. Well, you can look at it in the situation like if you are a child and you have parents that have a very contentious relationship where every chance they get to use or to hurt each other, they will do that. Mm-hmm. You growing up seeing that, you see intimacy as a weakness. Mm-hmm. You see it as a way for another person to hurt you. And so you block yourself off from that. You could call it, well, I don't want to be pussy whipped or I don't want to be dick whipped. I don't want none of that. Love is not real. It's just a set of chemical reactions, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can close yourself off to intimacy. Right. Well, you're hurting yourself because you're thinking, well, sexually, whatever, I'm closing myself off. But you're also closing yourself off to a bunch of people that can actually be a friend to you, a mentor to you. I've seen what happens when, you allow yourself to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. You get taken advantage of and you get hurt. Yeah. And some people are just like, no, I don't want that. The problem is that they don't want to express that to people. Mm-hmm. They don't want to tell you there's only a certain level of intimacy we're going to get. They want to give you that impression that they can go deep, but then at some point
you hit the wall.
You hit the wall, and the person feels it, and they take it upon themselves. They're like, well, why the wall? What has happened? Did you realize something about me? Mm-hmm. That you've stopped the trust building, and then the relationship just falls apart. Yeah,
But, and to your point, Akil, like when you brought up, the lady, who was expressing like frustrations around like the man not being emotionally available when she wants to take it there. It's a few like different dynamics I want to speak on, but one big one is I feel like conversations like these are so important for us to have because a lot of times like you can't really fault someone or be upset at someone if they're not like on the same vibration level or energy level or mental level that you're on, and trying to force that on them is where you have issues. That's why you have to be, and everybody's not blessed to be like self-aware and, have like emotional intelligence on just other human beings. But clearly, she can't lie to herself and try and force a relationship if you see like, oh, it's kind of looking like that relationship where he only hits me up when he wants, sex. I can't try and force that part of a relationship onto him. So I have to take that information. You show me what you're capable of. You show me how far you're willing to go. And you know, if you really cared about me that much, you would care more about, you know, just the physical. So I can make my decision on how I want to move forward. You know, if that's the case, then I don't, you know, this isn't what I want. I don't want it just to be a fling thing. I want a partner who will listen to me emotionally. She can move, you know, in that sense. But unfortunately, like, society isn't really like that. A lot of times we get clouded in our own thoughts and our own judgments and expect other people to think and feel how we feel. And that's where you have, you know, situations where you guys have arguments, you guys have fights, when I feel like it could be a little bit more simple when you maybe just state your expectations and your standards up front, and don't keep repeating yourself, don't keep forcing that. You know, they're going to show you how they're going to respect your expectations and your standards, so you move off of that instead of, you know, trying to, like...
I agree, but I think that some people, especially people who are truly hurt, realize how stunted they are. And so they pretend to be something else to hide their vulnerability. You know, no, not everybody's going to come out and tell you, I've had some things happen in my past, so I'm not going to be too forthcoming in this friendship. I know you want it to go a certain way, but there's only a limit to what I can give you. They're not going to tell you that. They're just going to let you experience that, you know?
It's funny because you're talking about that. I was thinking about this earlier and I didn't have the right words then, but so much of these barriers and walls are fear-based. I'm afraid to be more intimate because I'm afraid of what that's going to feel like, or I'm going to go into a space, or I might lose you, or whatever, right? And, you know, we're talking about all these things that keep us from really being able to have the experiences with other people or be our true selves. There's so much of it is just being afraid of what that's going to entail.
It's kind of a fear of being accepted in a sense, right? That's why we keep bringing up, like, these safe spaces, because if you're feeling in a space of safety, you feel like you're already accepted. So you don't have to block these certain parts of yourself. You don't have to carry on a certain way. You know, society does play a part of it. And I think that even, especially for Black and brown men, I think that they think society likes to correlate emotions as a feminine trait.
Yeah.
And when it's a feminine trait, you're like, I'm a guy, I'm a man. I don't have that, right? So if I'm upset, I'm going to do things a little bit different. I can't express to you in this manner. I can't say it in this way, which, like, even for me, you know, as me being more of a masculine female, a lot of times if people are like, oh, you can express your emotions well, I'm like, it's a human trait. Do you understand that? Like, it's a human trait. Like, I need you to separate all these other things that you're putting on. It's a human trait. We all have emotions.
Yeah.
Some people may be able to express it verbally. Some people express it physically and all these different ways, but people just are looking at it in a certain way. Because even what I've learned even is being able to express to my friends, because I definitely don't tell a lot of people I love you. But I've learned later in my life to say that. Like, I lost my dad. My dad was very, like, caring. He was the person out of my parents. My mom wasn't really a hugger. She didn't hold our hands. That was my dad, right? That was my dad. And I think, like, reflecting back on it, I'm like, it's awesome. Here's this Black guy that loves to hug his kids, that loves to kiss his kids. So even my brothers as parents now, I can see how they connect with their kids that way because our dad showed us that, right? And when my parents split when I was younger, I lived with my mom. So I have a lot of my mom's traits of being like, I don't hold hands. It's not my thing to do, right? But now being older, especially like I said, when I lost my dad, I started to tell my friends, like, yeah, I love you. I just want you to know that, like, I love you. I'm proud of you. Right. Yeah. And even in saying, like, I'm proud of you. You did something that was super hard and you didn't think you could do it. Proud you got through that. It wasn't something that I would have done before, but I was like, I have to be able to express those because we all feel these things. And sometimes it's good for another person to hear that because that's also providing them that safety of being like, you can share your emotions with me. You can tell me how you feel.
I think it's hard for men because there's so many rules on how they can express emotions. The only emotion they are free to express is anger. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When a man lets loose and punches a wall, people are just like, I guess he just, he had to let that loose. you know? But if I was to do that, they would be like, what is with this chick? Like, what's going on with her? Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, there's less freedom for men to say, you know, you hurt me with that comment. Like, I trusted you and you just said something in front of the woman I love or the man that I love, and you embarrassed me and you hurt me. It's a great person that has the emotional intelligence to be able to say that to a friend or a relative, because a lot of times you get judged when you start revealing emotions. It's like, you should never let anybody understand how they got to you. So don't ever express that. You know, you don't express that. And maybe if you do express that with other men, not in mixed company.
Right.
You know?
Not in mixed company.
So,
yeah, I was just listening to the stories, and I have to say, in contrast, I had such an open and caring. It doesn't mean that I didn't hear all the rules and stuff, but for some reason, it's my little brain was like, I don't care. No, I'm gonna cry right now, and I don't care if I get yelled at or whatever. Crying is about to happen, right? And I remember I remember struggling so much as a kid, because I felt completely free to express this, but I kept hitting walls. It didn't stop me from doing it, but I just never understood, why are you keeping me from hugging this person that I like, right? I remember being at school, and I was very young. This guy and I, we did everything together. We even used our pencils to roll each other's hair back then. Like, it was such a cute thing. But it was... You had hair? There was a time. But it was just so cute, because we didn't, like, when we were at school, we just hung out. We just did whatever, right? And it was like, I would say months into this, they separated us. And I didn't understand why it was I wasn't allowed to play with my best friend. It was the first time I'd ever had a best friend. And I was always a feeler, right? And of course I cried, because I'm like, what's going on, right? And I remember having a conversation with my mom now, and this is really a story about just evolution, is that she was bound to those same rules. You know, and I remember when I was a kid, she used to get mad whenever I cried. Nothing like severely happened, but I still cried, right? And we were having this conversation, and she was talking about, it's like, yeah, men should be allowed to cry, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at her with the funniest look, and I go, look, what was that about when I was a kid?
right. Yes.
And her reaction was just heartwarming to me, because she's like, I'm so sorry, baby.
Yeah.
I know better now. And I love the fact that there can be redemption, there can be growth, right? And because whatever I was going through on my path, she was going through on hers as well.
Yeah, yeah.
A couple things, I guess, playing on my mind. Oh, yes, a couple things playing on my mind. Like, I do wonder, like, it's ironic to me how I find with men, you know, we tend to think of ourselves as the logical gender, and you know, we don't express emotions, but I think there's a stunning lack of self-awareness. And even in terms of just in general society observing how, I mean, when you express anger, whether or not it's a traditionally masculine emotion, you're expressing emotion. You're not being logical, right? And it's a harmful emotion. There's no positive to anger. And I don't know if it's like, if maybe people need to be a bit more self-aware. We need to just be a bit more cognizant of the fact that people are being emotional in that instance, and that it's okay to then channel that to more, I guess, helpful, less harmful, outwardly harmful emotions, instead of sort of like being deluded. Because I think we engaged in this delusion that, you know, we're always being rational. We don't somehow, for some reason, recognize the rationality in anger. But I did also want to, like, I guess, you know, we talked about how men are emotionally closed off, and how that's born out of, you know, say people projecting homophobia onto them, for instance. Now, you mentioned something about your mom and how she was emotionally, and how that affected you. And I'm Nigerian, right? And I remember Wale, the rapper, I don't know if anyone is familiar. Yeah, he was on the Red Table Talk, and he was talking about how he never saw his parents say "I love you" to each other. And I think of myself and how that, like, I think of my interactions, romantic interactions, and I think I never quite saw my parents say they love each other too. I don't know if this is, I suspect it's the predominant phenomenon in Nigeria, and I think that affected how outwardly expressive of my emotions I am, and it's been a problem in my past relationships. So I don't even tell my siblings I love you, and I love them, and I would do anything. I'll literally die for any of them, and it just doesn't come out. Like I think I told my mom once by text I love you, and she was like, thank you. and so I was like, that's not happening ever again.
We'll be right back after these messages. What do your friendships say about you? Are they a toxic cocktail or a healthy brew?
We're not talking as much anymore. I'm not calling you anymore. We're not texting anymore.
Do they encourage growth, or are they like weeds around your throat?
I have had the craziest issues with letting people go because I really believe that people can change.
Sometimes people do change, just not with you.
Do they enlighten and enrich you, or do they drain and deplete you?
Sometimes loving somebody means letting them go. I love you enough to where I'm going to give you the space to transform whatever your process is. I love you enough to recognize that I'm not serving or supporting you in that.
I sat down for a conversation on this topic with my friends, who I refer to as the board, to analyze the costs, the benefits, and the profound rewards. But sometimes we get a little off track.
That's another conversation, another show, when we drink and the shit we say, or do, or the pictures that we send. I'm sorry. Okay, stay on topic.
But in the end, we always bring it back. Listen to With Friends Like These, Season 3, Episode 6. And after you follow the Poet God podcast on your favorite podcasting app, a quick search of the Poet God on Twitter and Instagram will connect you to just what we have on tap. And if you're not that social, at thepoetgod.com, we got your back.
Add it up.
What I do wonder, though, is when you feel that love for whoever it is that you're expressing to, what are you feeling when you come up to that point where you want to say it, but you just don't? What's going on within you, if you can articulate that? And
I have also, how do you express it if you can't say it?
But I can also tag in on that after. So go ahead, please.
So it's weird. It feels like the word is cringy, but even though I know it shouldn't be, but it's like, this is, because my mom didn't even do this to me. Like, it's just, it feels queasy. It feels weird and odd. And I just don't know. It's like, that's as best as I can articulate it, because even to me, it makes no sense that I would feel this way. There's the follow-up question that you asked. I'm trying to remember.
I guess, like, if you can't say it, then how do you express it?
How do I express it? Yeah. So it's I express through acts of service. Exactly what it is. I will make sacrifices for people, like if it's monetary, if it's time, if it's whatever. Like I genuinely, and I've been honest with myself about this. I know that I genuinely go the extra mile in terms of like, even changing the course of my entire life to help the people I love. And, it's a journey to me, recognizing that not everyone can interpret your love in that way. I had this issue with an ex of mine. Like, she just couldn't, because I wasn't a traditional romantic person. And I feel that like, because of the way I'd grown up, I guess. But she also struggled to interpret that, okay, I'm giving you all of this money that's significant to me, for instance, to do this thing that, like, maybe no one else is willing to help you with. And it means I'm going to have less to put towards this other big project I perhaps want to work on. But, a signal of the love I have for you that I would make the sacrifice in the first place. So it's things of that nature, but also it's a journey for me trying to recognize not everyone can interpret that as love, I guess.
Yeah. And I get that because, so funny enough, my brothers and I, my oldest brother, his wife always jokes with my other brother and I's partners. Cause she tells them like, they don't say I love you to each other because we're the same way, right? We don't really express it, but I know my brothers love me and I know that they know I love them because of the same thing. We're acts of service, right? And in my mind, I connected with like, I can tell you whatever you want to hear. You want to hear that ugly pair of shoes look the best thing? Those are the best sneakers. Where'd you get them? Let me get those, right? I can tell you whatever, but I'm going to be there and show up for you if I care for you. So it's very similar in that sense. And it's like, why can't you see this? I've had the same issue with previous partners that are like, you don't tell me, so I don't feel like you love me. And I'm like, what the heck do you mean? You called me while I was asleep. I woke up, drove to you, did whatever you needed to do, and went back. How is that not love, right? But it is learning that people don't recognize it that way. And it is also just kind of finding a balance, because even still now, I tell my friends I love them, but I know that I may not do it at a level that people that are very expressive in that manner would like to hear it, or even for partners as much as they want to hear it. I'm like, I'm here, right?
It's not a wrong thing.
Yeah.
It's just that the way that person was probably raised
Mm-hmm.
or conditioned, they probably felt like they'd never heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the one thing that they demand from their partner if they're going to be in a relationship, because to them, they're like, yeah, people do things for me all the time, but people have their motivations, you know, but they want to hear the sweet talk, you know, that because even though they don't even, in the back of their mind, they recognize that anybody can say these words, you know, they still want that because they haven't gotten it.
Or you could be like my family, which is completely opposite Carla's. Is my family was the always huggers, always like and so for us, we demand it because it is something that we have always had. This has been our expression, right? Now we do have the acts of service and stuff too, but we're kind of like that, like, oh, what do you want? Right? Without the, oh, I love you. Okay, now I'm going to do something for you, right? So it's a combination of that. But our family has been rooted very much into the freedom. That's probably one reason why it made it so easy for me to always rebel against the rules, is because within my core family, we were always completely free to do whatever, right? You know, the rules still hung over our heads, but they weren't enforced, if you want to call it that, right? And so I can see what you're saying, that some people really, that they need that because they've been craving it. For us, if we don't get it, we think something's wrong because it has always been existent for us.
I got you.
One of Calvin's favorite poems on the podcast was one called "In My Mother's Shoes," and I think in that process of writing and articulating what I wanted to say to her, but also what I wanted to express about that relationship, was going through a journey of recognizing how she loved me, what the things were that she did that I didn't recognize or receive as a child as love. But not just from her, but other relationships, my grandmother's, for example. As an adult, I've been more aware in my own relationships, romantic and otherwise, of what those gifts are, because I want to show up with a attitude of gratitude, with a spirit of gratitude. And so because that's my intention, I don't want to miss the gifts. I don't want to, even in my friendships, I know that, you know, each and one of your presence here is an act of love for me, and I appreciate it, you know? And so I don't want any of that to be lost. You know what I'm saying? And so I think about that. I ponder that, because I want to make sure that at the end of the day, I didn't miss it. You know, that when I'm reflecting on my life, that I got it all, you know what I'm saying? And to be in that present moment and be grateful for everything that's there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you that, for example, like my son, we're all together with family. He comes running in the room. He trips. He falls. he starts to cry. I want to go to him, but everybody is telling me, you need to let him pick himself up. He'll be all right. You can't coddle him too much. He needs to be able to handle that, and it's a lesson for me in how my family wants me to treat my son, how they want me to limit my expressions of love to him to raise him strong. You know what I mean? So it's hard for me because in a sense, I want to raise him prepared for the world.
Right.
But I don't want to be one of those moms that just cannot let their sons go, that sees them as an extension of some kind of relationship. I want him to be mature, but it's like, how much love can I extend to him before it's smothering?
Why does it have to be all or nothing? Meaning that at that stage in life, he could need that from you, but then at another stage, I'm saying it doesn't have to be linear.
Well, that's all. I was also going to ask, because I hear that you have a son. Do you also have a daughter?
I don't.
Okay. Because I always wonder, because I've questioned my mom a number of times. You treated my brothers different than how you treat me.
Oh,
right?
There was a clear difference in the way my brother was treated as opposed to my sisters. It was even like my father didn't even consider it part of his job to really raise me, because he's like, your mother will raise you. You're a girl, I'm here to provide for you, but there's nothing that I can teach you, really. You know what I mean? He's like, my job is to deal with my son. That was his perspective. And, then as I'm older, he wants to take a lot of the credit for how I've grown up. It was your job to keep me off the pole. Ha jokes.
No, but you know what? There's a saying that my mom used to tell me when I was young. She said, I want to make sure you grow up being your father's child. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but what it is when a child does something good, they're like, oh, that's Mr. Such and Such's child. But as soon as the child does something wrong, they're like, where's their mother at?
Even you might have experienced it with even your own father, because I know my dad and a lot of other, I think, Nigerian dads have that tendency. It's like when they're mad at you, it's like they go to their wife and they're like, go talk to your child.
Right.
That's your kid too.
Yeah.
Why do you dissociate yourself from your child in those moments? I don't know. So I do think maybe that's something I never actually thought about consciously, but I wonder if my mom was trying to raise me to be my father's child. Hearing that sort of feedback from my father, at times.
I'd never heard that before, but I also came from a single mom household. So never had that as an experience. My mom was very big about, I know the world is big and bad outside, but inside these doors, you're always going to be loved, right?
Right.
So that whole thing about coddling and stuff, I was an only child because she was a teenage mother, right? For a long time until she was almost 30, and then she popped out some girls, right? but
you love your sisters, though.
Right? Those are my girls. But talking about the differences, I feel like my mom's differences really had to do with her maturity. She treated my sisters differently because they came at a very different stage of her life than I did. She was struggling to find her own footing at 17 years old.
Right.
When I was on her hip, right? But I do feel like that the essence of what you're saying is right, because those are the rules I've heard other places, right? There is a difference between, how parents are even, considered, right? And I think it's weird to me because I always think of, in my fantasy, there were always partnerships, right? And I never understood this dynamic until I started seeing other families.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I learned growing up, and somebody else mentioned it, I don't remember, but I think we miss out that our parents are growing up the same time we are, right? But we have this thought process as a child, like our parents know it all. But it is when you get older, you're like, no, you messed up here, right? But we're so unforgiving of our parents because we're like, you were in control of our lives. But they were growing up the same time as us. And at whatever age you are right now, I don't even care if I'm talking to somebody that's 76 years old. They're going to be like, there's still more I need to learn. So there is really, in life, there's no point that you stop growing and learning. So they're trying to do the best that they have with the things that they have, the resources they have, the knowledge, the experiences that they have. I've had conversations with my mom now as an adult, and I'm like, you know, I forgive you for things that I was really upset with you when I was young, because I didn't realize at the time you were doing the best that you could for me, given what you had. And I'm here where I am today because of those things. Some of them may have not played out the way that I wanted it to, but it's what has me here. And I thank you for even just doing what you did for me, right? So I think that's some of the things that we miss out on.
Yeah. And I also just want to touch on what everybody's kind of been talking about. Like I said, once again, I'm not a parent yet, but I feel like one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard somebody give, like a young parent, was just there's no guide or, lesson plan on how to raise a child. It's always going to be different. There's no cookie cutter for it, but just be the best person that you can be, because at the end of the day, the kids are going to pick up, you can have conversations with them, but, I want to say that somebody said communication is only 10% verbal, right, and then 90% everything else about communication. So you can have conversations with your children, don't do this, don't smoke weed, don't get tattoos, don't get, all of these things, don't sell drugs, but they're going to see what you do, how you, handle your emotions, how you handle stress. Right. Are you a complainer? All of those things. And they're slowly but surely going to, pick those things up as they grow up. And that's going to unconsciously, shape them into who they are. So some of the best things that you can do for your child is just be a good person, because they're going to, watch you and everything like that. And then also you hit on it is, I have conversations. I was blessed to have grown up in a 2-parent household, and both my parents did a great job in raising me and my sister. But I'll have conversations with some of my friends about, they might be mad because they didn't grow up with their dad, and the only time that they asked their dad for something, he didn't come through. So now it's a situation of, I'm not even fucking with you at all, because the one time I need you, you're not there for me, or whatever the case may be. And, I try to play not necessarily devil's advocate, but I'm a big person on looking at life through multiple different perspectives and multiple different points of views, because you'll feel one way looking at it from this angle, but totally different from another angle. So, just kind of give them some slack and understand, at the end of the day, they're human beings also. They go through their own problems, their own struggles. So, what you want to take from them is it would be better and beneficial to have a parent that supports you emotionally, financially, and all other areas. But I told him, honestly, bro, look at you. You have your own apartment, you have your own car, you're paying your own car note. Essentially, the relationship that you had with your parents, they never really backed you financially. That forced you to be a hustler. That forced you. So, it sucks that you can't say, my dad bought me my first car or whatever. But in a sense, that curse kind of turned into, your blessing. So you can't always look at a situation oh, this is an L, or this is, the sucky part of my life, because at the end of the day, it could turn around and be the reason, that you are who you are today.
I was just going to say one thing that also resonated me with that is that whole thing I was talking about. If you really are going to just cut the parents off, you're not acknowledging the fact that they may have grown over that time. And now they may be in the best position to be what you were looking for, right? And it's just a matter of being open to that.
Another example of a person who's cutting themselves off from intimacy because of fear, because they don't want to feel let down again, but then they're stopping themselves from a personal relationship that could benefit them, that could heal them, but they won't allow that to happen. Instead of saying all that, they're just going to say, no, I'm just done with them, and it's kind of like everybody else. With maturity, we can understand, you're hurting, you're healing, you're trying, but as a younger person, you're just not understanding that.
What are you afraid of? What have you been afraid to say? Subscribe and join us for the upcoming episodes as we continue to explore the shades of obey. I'm Mikhail Johnson, and this is the Poet God. Thank you for listening.